Hello and welcome back to Hegel on the beach. And we're in Bootle today, actually, as you can see. There's a new strand which is just over my left shoulder, and Oral, the big thing, covered in cloud now, actually. No, we're in, we're not in Bootle, of course, but we're back on the beach again. So enjoy the view. At the top of the big volcano, well, actually Hegel next to a volcano, because the thing covered in cloud there is a volcano, and you might get a view of it, but it might be so nice I want to come back and do another one here. Okay, so today we're doing observing reason. Now we've been going on about this for some time, but we're going to try and talk about this particular part of, I think it's about paragraph 233. So by the way, as we press on to reason, another one of my Ronnie Corbett digressions, here's a quote from Immanuel Kant on why this stuff is so important. So Kant says, what is enlightenment? Enlightenment is the human being's emergence from his own self-incurred immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to make use of one's own understanding without direction from another. This immaturity is self-incurred when its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but lack of resolution and courage to use it without direction from another. Sapere aude, have the courage to use your own understanding, is thus the motto of the Enlightenment. So that's hopefully what the video was about. It's trying to come to terms with stuff. So that's what's great about the Enlightenment, isn't it? And also, that's why people in Iran are standing up. And they've been standing up now for quite some time, in many cases choosing death over slavery. And if Iran 2022 isn't a living illustration of what Hegel might call the world spirit, then I mean, what is? It's an example of, like, I hate to use the word self, and it precedes another word, always annoys me, but when collective self-understanding, how people view themselves, and then I don't know what is, because it's on a national scale standing up against autocracy. Okay, so the massive digression I'm going to go off is necessary, because as we enter this world of reason, we need some historical and philosophical background to better understand this part of the text. So the part of the text I'm talking about is paragraph 233. So reason is the certainty which consciousness has of being all reality, or so it is in the way that idealism expresses its concept of itself, in the way that as consciousness which comes on the scene as reason and immediately has that certainty in itself, so too does idealism immediately give expression to that certainty. I am I, in the sense that the I, which is an object for me, is not as it is within self-consciousness in general, where it was there only as an empty object, nor as it is within free self-consciousness, where here it is just an object that withdraws itself from others, which nonetheless still counts as valid alongside it. Rather, it is an object with the consciousness of the non-being of anything that is other. It is a singular object. It is all reality. It is all reality and presence. Okay, now that's a very long, typical, endless sentence, difficult quote. And the great thing about doing these videos is I can do my own spin on it, okay? And I can go off on these wild goose chases to make these quotes understandable, I think. So that's the job of this one, isn't it? So the idealism, Hegel, because he's talked about idealism a few times there, he's referring to, okay, we know about German idealism, but he's referring to the philosopher here, Fichte, F-I-C-H-T-E. He is making a critique of German idealist philosophers. He's accepting some bits and he's throwing some other bits out. So Fichte, I haven't really talked about it before, I don't think so, but as Hegel mentions him here, that gives me an opportunity to digress, as he's just too significant a figure to skim over. So you'll hear about him a lot in the next few lectures, okay? So Fichte was a contemporary of Hegel, just a few years older. And in fact, he became an overnight sensation, if that was possible in philosophy, by writing an essay that people thought had been authored by Immanuel Kant. In 1794, Fichte wrote the first edition of his book, one of the most important works, which I'm going to mangle the German language, called, I think, Wissenschaftslehre, which is the science of knowledge. Okay, so people thought Fichte was Kant, so he was so clever, and he was from a poor background, which I might come to another time. So Harris, and I've been using a little bit of Harris's book here, in Hegel's Ladder, says of Fichte's project. So it is intuitively appropriate to say of Fichte's ego, and remember Hegel was just talking about ego, I as I, that it is the certainty of being all reality. The ego is all reality. Does that mean I'm everything? Well, what does he really mean by this? What does this ego all reality mean? That's going to be a theme, I think, in the next couple of vids. And why is Hegel referring to Fichte at this particular point? So to understand the phrase, the ego is all reality, we need to, unfortunately, briefly take 3 further historical steps backwards. And before we look at Fichte, it's only very briefly, we've got to go back to Kant. But to put Kant into context, yeah, we've got to go back a bit further to Spinoza. And I'm not just name dropping here, as though I know them, not be mates, but then we've got to go even further back to René Descartes. Now, I have mentioned him before. So he's kind of seen as the father, you know, gendered word, but the father of modern philosophy. So Hegel's ideas lie kind of on the same plane as Kant's. So Kant, Hegel, Fichte are all classified as, by historians of philosophy, as German idealists, and even Hegel was talking about himself. So German idealism itself, that was a reaction to Spinoza, and it was a revision as well of Spinoza. People were playing around with him. So Spinoza's philosophy was a product of the 17th century, I think, while German idealism was trending on Twitter in the 18th and late 18th and early 19th centuries. And Spinoza himself, in turn, was influenced by Descartes, who, as I said, was the foundational figure of modern philosophy. And he's probably the best person to have this jumping off point, because he made us first think about the mind-body problem. Okay, or mind-body dualism. And talking about that is the best way to understand where Fichte's ego is all reality comes from. Okay, so what's mind-body dualism? Why is it important for this section of the book as an explanatory framework? Oh, framework, good one. Descartes challenged traditional views on the universe and humanity's place in the cosmos. Okay, he defined the human as a subject. You know, it's a bit of a cliche, this word subject, but he defined it as a subject in probably the truest sense, the purest sense. So to define who we are and to resolve the problems of humans, he reversed philosophy's previous attention from without to within. What's that mean? Okay, so the solutions to human problems lie in unlocking the secrets of our mind and our inner understanding. Okay, so cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, is Descartes' starting point. So the I think is the founder principle of his philosophy. So what he really means is he's looking for an interior perspective. And that meant, to a certain extent, disengaging from the world. Now, I'm not disappearing up my own. It will be a bit more clear in a second. So, because through Descartes, we began to understand the world through our inner subjectivity. And this word subjectivity annoys me because it's hard to pin down. But one of Descartes, the best way to illustrate it is by saying this. One of Descartes' most significant works is actually called The Meditations on First Philosophy. So what that means is subjectivity. Descartes invites us to meditate on, just to reflect, to look within and think. So let's return to a problem outlined in an earlier video that Descartes asked us to solve. He said, how do I know if my mental representations, yeah, my inner thoughts match reality? What if, remember this one, an evil demon, that was Descartes' idea, if an evil demon or some genius computer programmer, like that's its modern counterpart, is able to control my senses and create a hologram universe, like the Matrix, where everything's false. What if we are just brains in vats, with all of our external senses manipulated by a computer or an evil demon, and reality is just beamed into our brains? Now, okay, it's ridiculous, but that was what Descartes' project, and some people actually, not just Descartes' project, some people earn good money in philosophy talking about this, okay, about this computer simulation thing. And they make good money making films out of it, okay. So Descartes' answer is this: at least I know my thinking mind exists. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Even if I am a brain in a vat, I can still think, okay. So Descartes introduces us to the concept of mind-body dualism. So the mind-body dualism assumes we're both a mind and a body, each of which is a separate substance, distinct from and independent from each other. So, and how do the two interact? Now, okay, Descartes, this is always the tricky bit. Descartes thought that mind and body, they did interact, and they did so through the pineal gland, which is there somewhere, right, your ear or top of your head, bottom of your head. But mind and body consisted of completely different elements, yeah? Spinoza, remember Spinoza? He comes next. Spinoza, on the other hand, said, whoa, no. He claimed that extension, or the physical world, and thought, so the physical world and what's in your head, they're the same substance, or the different attributes. Let me put it like this. They're different attributes of the same substance. Spinoza thinks that Descartes is wrong to say they are two independent substances. He maintains that they are in fact two qualities of the same thing. God, or nature, is the substance. Thinking is therefore just one aspect of substance. And a body is another characteristic of substance, or this old-fashioned word for stuff here, which is extension. Space, stuff in space. So Spinoza said this about Descartes' mind-body theories. Okay, so we've got Descartes with, oh, my brain, I can think, evil demon. Descartes, no, Spinoza says no. Not like this, but I'll quote him. So he says, such is the doctrine of this illustrious philosopher, Descartes, yeah? I can hardly believe to have proceeded from so great a man. Indeed, I am lost in wonder that a philosopher could maintain a hypothesis beside which occult qualities are commonplace. What does he understand, I ask, by the union of mind and body? What clear and distinct conception has he got of thought in most intimate union with a certain particle of extended matter? Truly, I should like him to explain this union through its proximate cause. That's telling you. That is telling you, okay? So, for Spinoza, the whole of the natural universe is God, or nature. God is a living God, and because Spinoza's God was inherent in nature, poets, and I've touched on this one, they were contemporary to Hegel, poets like Novalis, and these German idealists, the Romanticists and so on, they really liked Spinoza. Remember Novalis? Novalis was the fella who he fell in love with the 12-year-old girl, if you remember. If you can call it fall in love with 12. So sorry, I shouldn't laugh. But Sophie von Kuhn, her name was, and actually, sadly, she died when she was 15. But that was this romantic idea that. But okay, let's move away from the troublesome ones. But you've got other poets like British poets like Coleridge and Shelley, and they also seem to have found this idea of Spinoza's God inhering in nature, and one substance to be an attractive one. I mean, and who wouldn't? I mean, look at this. Look at this view. I mean, it's like, oh my God, literally, oh my God, look at that. If God isn't present here, wow. So, so this living, breathing God that surrounded us, and was with us. It was a tempting idea to follow, especially for those poets and thinkers who describe nature like so mystically. So God and nature being the same thing. So what's the downside of this? Okay. So if nature is eternal or self-caused, a self-caused whole, then outside of nature, there can't be anything. Everything must be brought into existence by nature. The way things are just follows on from nature or God's essence within an inevitable, unchallengeable determinism. Things happen only because of nature and its laws. Spinoza says, nature has no end set before it. All things proceed by a certain eternal necessity of nature. That's telling you. We humans are part of nature and we live, and our actions are determined by the same causal relationships as other bits of nature. Because the contents of our mind occur within this necessary causal sequence, our actions and thoughts and wishes are as automatically determined as any other occurrence in nature. As Spinoza says, in the mind, there is no absolute or free will, but the mind is determined to will this or that by a cause that is also determined by another, and this again by another, and so on to infinity. So no free will. We are robots. Okay, maybe that's putting it too strongly, but Spinoza puts it like this, okay? That God is the sole free cause, for God alone exists by the sole necessity of his nature and acts by the sole necessity of his own nature, wherefore God is the sole free cause. So the argument over free will and determinism also took place within the history of Christianity, and Spinoza continued the argument. He basically dispossessed us of free will, this swine, okay? And so whether I choose tea or coffee or not. But he replaced it with predetermined laws and mathematical regularity. And I mean, who likes maths? Come on, you know. Do you want maths to tell you what to do? Anyway, here's where Kant comes in, okay? So hopefully you can follow this stream of Ronnie Corbett consciousness through. By the way, for those who don't know, Ronnie Corbett was a comedian who used to go off in digressions. If you Google Ronnie Corbett, he used to talk about one thing and go off on something else. But hopefully you can see the thread running through this. You can see from Descartes, Spinoza, and Kant why they're all reacting back on each other and reflecting on what they've said before. So Kant comes in, and I quote at the start of the video, he took the opposite view of the robot. He said, a will, first of all, he says, a will was only free if it could be thought entirely independent of the natural law governing appearances in reference to one another, viz. The law of causality, he says in the Critique of Practical Reason. He divided the world into a phenomenal world, world of appearances, appearances, the key phrase, that's ruled by the laws of nature, and a noumenal world. I love the word noumenal, just a beautiful word, isn't it? And that's governed by freedom and ruled by the moral law. So noumenal, I think, I could be wrong, but I think it refers to, it's a Greek word, nous. You know, nous, your thinking mind. So you've got the appearance world and the thinking world, okay, you know. So Kant turns Spinoza's arguments on free will on its head because he restricts free will to the noumenal world, to the thinking world. Now, he didn't, excuse me, he didn't flat out refute Spinoza about the laws of nature determining how we act, but he came up with either a clever trick or a clever piece of argumentation or an incredible insight, one of the others, one of these three. It's how freedom and determinism are related. So I'll quote from Kant and his most famous work, The Critique of Pure Reason. He says this, every human being has an empirical character for his power of choice, which is nothing other than a certain causality of reason. Because this empirical character itself must be drawn from appearances as effect, and from the rule which we experience, and from the rule which experience provides, all the actions of the human being in appearance are determined in accord with the order of nature by his empirical character and the other cooperating causes. And if we could investigate all the appearances of his power of choice down to their basis, then there'll be no human action that we could not predict with certainty and recognize as necessary given its preceding conditions. Thus, in regard to this empirical character, there is no freedom. So he sounds like Spinoza. Here's the but in Kant's argument. But if we consider the very same actions in relation to reason, then we find a rule and order that is entirely other than the natural order. For perhaps everything that's happened in the course of nature and on empirical grounds inevitably had to happen, nevertheless ought not to have happened. At times, however, we find, or at least believe we have found, that the ideas of reason have actually proved their causality in regard to the actions of human beings as appearances, and that therefore these actions have occurred not through empirical causes, not through laws, no, but because they were determined by grounds of reason. Pure reason, as a merely intelligible faculty, is not subject to the form of time, and hence not subject to the conditions of temporal sequence. Okay, so whether I have tea or coffee in the morning, where's the law for that? I always come to tea and coffee. Okay, that choice. So this is the key bit now. The unity of apperception. That's Kant's solution to how the independent mind connects with the empirical world. Okay, the unity of apperception. To experience anything, sensations coming in from the outside world must be combined in a unity for consciousness. Otherwise, our minds would just be a chaos of sensations. So I can feel the wind on my back now. There's a bird tweeting. The seas, that's just in my hearing. The seas pound. There's a plane going out overhead. Leaves are rustling. I can feel I'm seeing all kinds of leaves and weird sensations, and dawn is breaking. So I can see all this really amazing stuff. How do I make sense of it? I've probably got about 1 billion neurons firing in my head with sensations. How does it get united into one thought? So, okay, a concept is a rule, and we judge concepts according to a rule. This is how he does it. So this kaleidoscope of sensory impressions that we're bombarded in, from touch to sight, smell, everything we're experiencing, they don't overwhelm us. They don't turn to chaos, because we're able to select concepts, bring them under a rule to make sense of them. This unity of apperception is a kind of filter. It's a synthesizer of concepts and sense impressions into one consciousness. Okay. Kant said, without sensibility, no object would be given to us, and without understanding, no object would be thought. Thoughts without concepts, thoughts without content are empty. There's no free-floating thoughts out there. But intuitions, sensations, without concepts are blind. We combine them when we think. Now that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You need a mind and you need the world, and they need to interact, and they need to be put together in some form, some synthesized form. So metaphysics nor empiricism on their own could justify the claim to know anything. Can't believe that both approaches were involved in understanding and should be combined. Okay, that is the necessary a priori element, theoretical. A priori is the theoretical stuff of metaphysics, should be combined with the a posteriori, cause and effect, element of empiricism. The necessary a priori element, Kant calls the categories. Now that's another thing. I'm not going to get into that table of categories, but I think you know where he's coming from. Unity of apperception, thoughts without content are empty, intuitions without concepts are blind. That's the thing. So, okay, that's a microcosm of Kant's arguments about how the mind works and its relation to the world, okay, and where he came from, where these ideas came from. Now, subsequently, I did say Fichte, and we're going to be talking about him. Victor moved away from Kant. He was heavily influenced by Kant, but he developed his own thoughts on how the mind and the world are related, which we'll come to next time. Remember, the ego is all reality. Okay, what's that mean? So we're going to talk about that. In the meantime, you know what? When I came here this morning, the volcano was like, you could see it. It was perfect. And I was praying that it'd get light because I haven't even had anything to eat when I come down. But we might see it. I might come back because it's such a lovely view, isn't it? Okay, so till next time, see you later. Victor next time.